Thank you so much. Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence sort of podcast interview series. I am so excited to have really one of my favorite venture capitalists, but favorite people. Just someone, we just spent a ton of time shooting this shit and we're like, wait, we need to get into this recording before we waste all the time that we had set aside for this. People in the world, Eric Bahn, who's been an amazing just entrepreneur himself. He's been a product manager. He started a wonderful, wonderful VC fund that everyone listening to this should have on their cap table, the Hustle Fund. And Eric, welcome to the show today. Thank you so much for being here.
Adam, it's a pleasure to be here. I love the fact that you are putting together this series because all of those sentiments are reciprocated back in terms of, man, you've been someone that's been amazing to get to know as a friend, but also just to bear witness in your incredible career. So I think we got a lot to chat about today. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
I think so too. That is the goal. And so on that note, what I always like to do with people, because I find people's background so fascinating, right? That is you are an entrepreneur of your own career in a sense, and forget all the other things that people might define as an entrepreneur. Walk me through a little bit about like the different things that you've done, right? You know, where you started, why you got into what you did, right? You left school at Stanford, went to Intuit, big company, sounds easy, basic, and then actually started your own company. But like, walk me through like even just that thinking, like why was that your first step?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'll go all the way from the beginning. So I'm born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. And then I was really fortunate to attend Stanford as an undergraduate. That's the way that I made it from Michigan over to California. And it's been 23 years here in the San Francisco Bay Area, living, working, building. So I would say that when I started college, my goal was to be a writer or maybe even like a lawyer. I just really like reading and writing and communication. And
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you really quick for 2 seconds right there. Even like one, why did you even choose Stanford, right? Like what was it about Stanford that you chose? It was just a great name, or were there things about it from an entrepreneurial perspective that made you choose it? And then number two, what do you think about the thesis that reading and writing is actually a key part of a great entrepreneur and maybe investor as well? Certainly like Charlie Munger is well known for that in Warren Buffett. But do you think that's almost been a foundation for everything else you've done?
Yeah, let's explore that a little bit. So I'll start with that first part. Why did I go to college in California? It was frankly the furthest distance geographically to Michigan. So nothing against
staying within the U.S. Staying within the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, nothing against like growing up in Michigan or anything like that. But the world that I grew up in the 80s and 90s felt pretty small on the west side of Detroit. And, you know, I didn't see that many examples of entrepreneurs or innovators. There's a lot more kind of a conservative outlook in terms of the desired jobs to have: doctors, lawyers, nurses, engineers. Nothing against those professions, but that was kind of where my world was surrounded by. And I felt like I needed to see something that was outside of that community. And California has great weather. And I think that was pretty much it. It was like, it's far and the weather looks good. But entering that ecosystem was quite special because this is where I think I developed a lot of interest in eventually what I did study, which is sociology in college. Sociology comes from this notion basically that if you consider society to be this known entity that just exists the moment that you're created or born, society has a big impact in terms of shaping you as an individual, your proclivities of what music you like, what food, but also what you want to do with your life. And I think that's what Stanford did for me. You know, I came in there wanting to be a writer, but I emerged realizing that there's a place for me in Silicon Valley if I want to kind of chase this dream here too. And it's fine that I don't have a technical background either. So I think armed with that kind of confidence, it was something special. And I accidentally found out that I really love tech. I accidentally found a problem that I wanted to work on with my first company. And that sort of set the motions to allow me to become a founder. Yeah. So that's, I think, the reason why I want to pretty much build the rest of my life here and my family here.
I mean, it makes a ton of sense. This is one of it really has been in the past 20, 30 years, one of the greatest generators of innovation. Certainly wealth has come from that in a really big way because it has changed the world in profound ways, good and bad. And it has been a big reason for that. But that's why I'm here too, right? Why did I move out west? Same thing. This is where all the coolest things were happening. This is where you could build your dream and be who you wanted to be. And I think probably most epitomizes the American dream in the sense that like if you work hard, I feel like most tech startups have a meritocratic overall mindset where it's like, if you're good, I don't care where you came from, I don't care what you've done, you have a chance to be yourself, and we're going to celebrate that completely, and even celebrate you leaving my company and going to start your own to go build something great next.
Yeah. And that's something I think I've always appreciated about you too, Adam, as like a Tennessee kid who made his way over here to
Well, DC,
San
but
Francisco Bay
Tennessee
Area.
for college, but yes.
Yeah. East Coast, the little bit less obvious areas for,
Totally.
tech
I
and
should have
things like
gone to
creative activity.
finance. I should have gone straight to finance and done that whole usual path, like financial
Or
consulting.
inside the Beltway, right? In
Go
this
to.
case.
I mean, I worked on Capitol Hill. I did a whole summer internship. 2 internships actually in Capitol Hill. I worked for God, blank on his name. A great senator, and then also the U.S. District Court for D.C. as well, John McCain. I worked for Senator John McCain on Capitol Hill, which was amazing, and then worked as a law clerk for the Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court for D.C. And it was great, and it would have been an easy path to try to stay in that and make a real impact. I mean, actually, I've maybe the odd view of the world that politicians, many go into it for the wrong reasons, but there are some ones who are out there and people working for government who care deeply about making a large impact. And there's a really positive side. But my assumption was and still is that you can make a bigger impact if you are in tech in a lot of different ways. And certainly Elon Musk is almost a state unto himself, is a great example of how you really can have power if you get big enough.
That's certainly true. Well, never say never. I'm going to vote Adam Spector 2036 for president. So
I've got a lot of people say that to me, but don't hold your breath.
Yeah. And then your second part of the question related to writing and reading, and like, did that discipline actually translate to the work that I get to do after college and into my current career? I think the answer is yes. Adam, in private, you and I have had conversations just in casual dialogue about the power of communication. And I think in my 20s as a founder, I realized like, oh yeah, everything is actually sales. It's not just like me trying to sell my Honda Odyssey to Adam, and that's a single turn transaction. That's not quite what we're talking about. It's more just like this idea that you're trying to sell people to join your company as new employees, or sell a vision for your existing employees about this thing, or your investors and so forth. There's always something in terms of just understanding how to rally people around a movement that you're trying to create. But in my 30s, this is actually where I think it gets more relevant to the question. At some point, I figured out that, yeah, everything may be sales, but perhaps the higher order way of thinking about it is everything is storytelling. And good storytelling usually starts from great listening, understanding like Adam's childhood, what the journey has been like for him, and then seeing whether we can align in terms of the values of our shared experiences so that the story makes sense. And then the sale makes sense for us to team up and do things together. And I think that's something that you and I quickly realized about each other when we began to work with each other. It was like, yeah, there's a lot of shared values here, and we want to try to build our careers together in some sort of orbit to one another. And when you find that, and you exercise, I think, a little bit of effort behind the storytelling side of it, it actually makes the relationships feel even deeper around you. So with that, like, I apply this not just to my job, but also to my family and my friends, because those are folks that I really endeavor to go very, very deep with.
And does that mean then, I want to still come back to kind of the reading part maybe, but like speaking of the storytelling or writing piece, how would you define that? As how critical is that in your ranking of like what's important for a good entrepreneur with like sort of the idea of storytelling?
Yeah, great. So there's a great tweet that was put out 5 years ago by the co-founder of Twitch, Justin Can. He said, first-time founders focus on product. Second-time founders focus on distribution. And I think that this is a spot-on, brilliant assessment of what the founder journey looks like. A lot of us get obsessed by creating this shiny, beautiful object.
Yep.
And then say, like, if we build it, they will come. Like Field of Dreams style. That's a 90s movie reference. But the reality is that almost never happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. The best founders I know, including the one I'm looking at right now for the podcast listeners, that's Adam. They invest a lot of time on customer discovery, getting to see, like, is there a market out there? Can I get people to even buy my products prior to even having it fully built or built at all? And those that kind of validate the product market fit as early as possible, I think, tend to win, or actually at least de-risk enough where, like, the chance that you can get lucky enough to win, those conditions just improve. And a lot of that is accomplished just by being able to communicate super well with people and then explain like why what you're building is good news for them, for them to also engage and buy and participate in it as well.
In I think a lot of that, right, is because you have to convince an early customer that they should actually trust you and your totally crappy MVP, that they should actually trust some core part of their business and actually hand over cash for that.
Yeah.
Or something really similar to cash for that, to go do that. Like that's
Totally.
a big trust thing. And then I mean, on top of it, tell me if this is another part of it though as well. So first of all, the Justin Kahn quote is spot on. I've seen way too many founders, by the way, who they're like a year after they got all this big fundraise, great, congrats. They go away in a hole and build product for a year, and they come out like, we're ready. We have a few core customers we've been testing with, and now we're ready to go have the world use us. I'm like, you've done zero marketing, zero sales. You're starting from zero, and now you only have 12 months of runway, and that's not enough to get you really going in the sales and marketing side, and you're in trouble.
That's right.
And they don't quite get that. And I'm like, you're already too late. You should have started your marketing journey on day one, even if you don't have a product. Just BS it, put stuff out there, test things, sell people on the vision. You don't need to have a real product in many cases even to do that.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, conversations, once you can get them, are free, right? Like that's the part. It's just like it's a chance for you to learn to test a different kind of angle for how you're telling the story. And I guess I also think about customer discovery and selling and storytelling in a different light as well for why I like to do it so much. So at a little bit of context, at Hustle Fund, as one of the co-founders, I generally take the lead on fundraising for our fund because it's an activity that I enjoy so much. And part of what my definition of joy is meeting people and seeing whether I can establish some baseline level of vulnerability on both sides. Mm-hmm. Like what can I get to get Adam comfortable to share a little bit more about what his family's like, or his kids, or something that's going on in his life. And I will always reciprocate. And even if the sale doesn't happen, that's fine, because I generally walk away with like, a better understanding of who this individual is. And it feels like a massive gift. And also never say never. This person may not be a fit, but he or she may have someone that walks away and says like, you know what, Adam is a really great guy. There's this other founder that could be really perfect to work with. Right. And that's, I think, the joyful kind of K plus 1 plus X factor, whatever the viral loop equation is, that tends to happen after really good storytelling is you get a chance to represent yourself and your values, hopefully, and your humanity. And then karma sort of rewards you. And karma does reward you a lot. It seems like in Silicon Valley, more so than any other place I've seen.
I would totally agree. That's one of the pros of Silicon Valley. And actually, it's funny, a really, really, really famous investor, I was lucky enough to be on a call that he had recently, and he just sort of mentioning he's moved back to the Bay Area. And someone was asking him, like, hey, do you invest in companies outside of the Bay Area and over, let's say, in Europe or overseas? And his quote literally was, why invest in a silver mine when you can invest in a gold mine? I thought it was a really smart comment. I mean, right, in certainly for the US versus Europe or other parts of the world, but even more so as well. And I know you guys invest in lots of other parts of the world too. So there are sort of competing perspectives there. But that ecosystem does build on itself, right? And it sort of leads to this compounding effect of things. And to your point is you're playing yourself, and you might not have defined it this way, but I view you as playing a really long-term game, right? You recognize that you're going to be in this basically your whole career, probably your whole career. And so, yeah, but someone might not be the right target today, but it might be for your next company, or in your case, your next fund, like fundraise and like fund 5, fund 6, whatever it's going to be, like all those sorts of things. And my assumption is a lot of, frankly, entrepreneurs of all stripes forget that like they're in it for the long haul, and every relationship has payoff someday if you're smart about it.
Yeah, I think so. I think I take a simpler view of life, though, in some ways, which is at this stage of my career, I'm in my early 40s, and I think I found my last job in running Hustle
Beautiful
Fund.
Thing.
And yeah, how many 40-year-olds can say that, right? That's ridiculous. But every day I wake up, and the first question I have for myself is, am I going to continue to solve for joy today? And like, for me, joy is defined in a very simple kind of way. It's just like surrounding myself with human beings whom I love.
Yep.
Because what I find is that if I can accomplish that and contribute back to them, then the work just gets easier, and it gets and actually the output gets better, right? Because like I'm serving people that I really, really love and appreciate. I can say that absolutely with my friends like yourself, but also just like my teammates I get to see. But of course, it applies to my kids too, and my wife, right? And all that entails. But I don't know, like the West really has a way of softening your heart. You know, I grew up fairly conservative in Michigan, probably held more like conservative views of life, but now I feel like I'm just like a soft hippie at times because just karma has rewarded me so much. I just feel more compelled to just like expose more love that I can contribute out to the world. And somehow like the universe is continuing to reward me for whatever reason into the right directions and more interesting people. Yeah. So
well, don't forget,
kind of what's going on.
you're not just a soft West Coast hippie. You're the soft West Coast minivan driving hippie, which I know you're
Yes.
known for as well. So you're never.
I wouldn't mind getting by. We were talking about cars earlier. I know that you just got a new one, and I have been looking at the new ID Buzz, the Volkswagen electric bus.
Yes,
right. So I think that's where I'm going to go next, and then the brand of being like total West Coast hippies, like complete. Right, you got a VW bus, and it's electric,
and decorate it like it's a '70s flower child car, and you'll be
with
really
all the flowers. Yeah, I'm open to that actually.
I mean, you should truly brand it that way. But then going back to one of the things, one point you made that was really interesting, right? Maybe a key part of storytelling, and maybe for a good entrepreneur, is the idea of having, and I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, so tell me if this is accurate, but like having this curiosity mindset where you're like, I'm actually enjoy talking to you because I'm curious about who you are. And that leads to then people talking about themselves, which then leads you to understand ways if you're working on a transactional sort of situation, that curiosity mindset will give you the ends of people will tell you things if you ask with genuine curiosity.
Always. And great storytelling starts with great listening. And great listening has to be rooted in curiosity. So I'll sort of share like something. It's like a very famous like Christian sermon I heard on a cassette tape once, like while driving around in Michigan. Like my mom like pumped this in when I was like 15 years old.
Yeah.
But it did actually ground a kind of a very important principle about people, which is every single human on Earth is a winner. If you imagine it, like life began with this massive race. It was you versus millions of other sperms trying to go after this egg. And guess what? You won, right? Like, let's put aside like the definition of conception and all that stuff. Like, it's not about that. But I always thought that the joke was great, which was, and when you think about it, it is like miraculous. The fact that we're even here speaking today, and whether you're the most famous or accomplished person at all, or you're someone that seems on the surface to have like a banal life. I mean, all of us actually have an exciting and amazing journey, right? And very few opportunities where you meet someone who will truly take the effort to try to hear and see you as well. So like, I know this is a bit of a digression here, but I want to like emphasize this point. My wife is a life coach, and she says that the number one thing that people are missing in life with the clients that she works with, of which she's served hundreds at this point, is they don't feel like they have anyone that truly sees or hears them. Right. And I'm not trying to say that like for your client that you're selling $100,000 deal to, like, you need to like be their life coach, but exercising, I think, from a place of like genuine curiosity without any agenda, like what their life is like, what they're going through, what their hopes and dreams are, both professionally and personally, it will actually naturally lend itself back to deepening that relationship so that when you do have transactions, it feels natural, or you actually have a better context for what's happening. So I'll pause there actually.
No, I mean, that element, being thoughtful, having that curiosity is so critical. And then also, how does that lead to the other part of sort of storytelling, where it's not just like, for an entrepreneur, it's not just about obviously your kind of like pitch to VCs, but to me, storytelling is we all tell stories every day, certainly to ourselves, number one, but certainly to your venture capitalists, your investors, essentially, your team, your customers. Everybody is a good story. And this is something I'm trying to tell my team about, is that same mindset. Like, look, being great at telling the story is not just about the person directly in front of you. It's about all the other people you need to sell every day, including yourself, to get up in the morning. Like, I tell myself a story about why I'm doing this job. And the more I tell it, the more excited I become and energized by that story. And it could be complete BS, right? It could be my own reality distortion field about why I'm doing this, but it doesn't matter because I've told myself the story and I believe it at this point. And that makes it's easier for me to tell the same story to everyone else and attract better teammates, attract better customers, attract better investors. And that continues then to start compounding, which is a whole different topic we can talk about. But like storytelling from that perspective, of, it's really about, it goes through everything you do in life.
It does. As you're sort of describing this to me, I actually thought about a big influence I had in my life when I was a kid. So in my area of Michigan, there were a lot of Mormon families. So many of my friends were Mormon. And in high school, generally, especially for the boys, you go on a mission for 2 years to some part of the world as part of the church evangelical efforts to try to, proselytize or bring more people into the church, right? Now, you can imagine how hard this job might be, like a young 18-year-old kid or 20-year-old kid going to like a place and 99.9% of people telling you to F off, in their local language and so forth. So when I saw some of my friends over winter breaks during college, when they're taking breaks from their mission or come back home for whatever reason, I would say like, yo, how is it? Like, it sounds like the worst thing ever, going to these places where like people are so hostile to you, or like, you're trying to sell something as big as religion. Every one of my buddies loved the experience. And they said like, look, even though most people don't want to hear it, I'm coming from a place where I'm selling absolutely good news. Like, I believe in my product, which is joining my church, and that I think I can actually save your life. So if my goal is just a handful of people that I can save, that's a small hinge that's going to swing a very wide door in terms of like the family's life and, their prospects for spirituality and so forth. When I think about tools like Levy, your company, or Hustle Fund, my company, we're grounded, I think, by the fact that it's easy to tell the story because it's good news. Like, if I'm talking to you to become an investor in Hustle Fund, it's because I have good news to share. I really, really believe in what we're doing here. If you're pitching Levy to a founder or to a VC fund, it's you get the same energy, man. I've heard your pitch. It's good news. Like, I can save your
I'm going to save you I'm going to give you 3 extra months a year. Efficiency. Yeah. Like, it's a great news.
Man. I mean, that's good news. But I have been in careers selling things that I didn't believe. And that's actually where the darkest moments of my career have been, which is when I didn't actually 100% believe that I was selling good news to you, that I actually believed. And, I never want to be in a position like that again.
I want to go there, but given time, I want to go back to something else you said that maybe is more interesting, right? Which is, we talked a lot about now the writing side of Stanford and why you went to Stanford and what you wanted to be, right? Or from the writer perspective, but there's also the reader perspective and knowledge earned and gained. And how much do you think that level of earning and learning this knowledge over all the years in your career have made you better as an entrepreneur and better in all the different facets of your life? Like, just the education you've gotten from books, from news articles, you name it.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I think about the reading, I don't actually think about it in terms of like what I actually learned. Today, actually, when it comes to the craft of storytelling, I normally index mostly towards fiction because I like to hear what other great storytellers have done. I don't read that many business books anymore. But in college, I had to do a lot of reading. I studied political science. I studied sociology. These are very reading and writing kind of heavy things. I have a learning disability, so I can't actually like read a piece of text and like immediately understand it. I actually have to read it generally 3 to 5 times.
Wow.
And that slowed me down. But this is what I got out of it from high school all the way through college and probably through my life now, which was the way that I was going to perform was by outworking everyone, right? If it took me 5 reads to finally understand it to the level of someone that was a classmate, that's fine, right? I will do what needs to be done in order to get the output that I need. And that is actually the blessing that I've had from this condition, which is just like, I'm not afraid to work really, really hard. And I kind of enjoy that process now because, as you know, Adam, as like a grizzly founder yourself, at this point, you're a serial entrepreneur. Oftentimes it comes down to just being the last person standing to be the winner, right? Yeah. Don't give up too early. That's it.
And Eric, where do you think that comes out from a sort of to the point of like you had this disability and it made you sort of better in a sense, like it gave you this edge. How many of the best entrepreneurs that are out there do you think have something similar in their life, right? You have Steve Jobs, who was adopted, and I think that gave him a different perspective on things. You got Elon Musk, who I think from what I've read is like was really kind of massively abused essentially by his dad when he was younger, and his parents were divorced. And like so many of the great entrepreneurs in the world have something that's an edge. Not all of them. I think Jeff Bezos had a pretty good life overall, but like there are a lot of them that have something that is like, hey, like there's this edge that made me be different. Like I was an outcast in some way or another, and that forced me to be different. Do you think that's a big part of entrepreneurial excellence is having an inbuilt edge that others just don't have and can't pull from?
I don't really think so. I mean, I think I have plenty of examples of people as well that just had great privilege, and then that was the accelerant to their life. And I don't know if actually trauma is necessarily ever a great thing, just in any form.
No, you never wish it on anyone, to be clear.
Never wish it on any, of course not, right? Having like if it leads to like a chip on the shoulder where you work harder, like I don't know, maybe that is a mixed blessing. But I kind of think of it differently, regardless of what your background is or not. One of the top criteria I have as an investor is this a founder that's a missionary or a mercenary, right? Let's start with the latter. A mercenary is just like me and Adam, like we see this opportunity to create like a porn site, right? Like we think we make tons of money, we don't really like care to actually like be known as like founders in this category. No judgment to anyone that's doing adult entertainment or whatever, but we think we're just gonna make a lot of money, right? And I tend to find that founders who are just motivated solely on the measurement of money don't really have great longevity in those kinds of businesses because there isn't really innate passion that's born from it. Versus like a missionary, maybe it's something like, I'll take an example. I started as an ed tech founder in my career. Me and Adam decided like, we're going to completely level the playing field when it comes to early education through AI of some form, right? And for whatever reason, like that's just something that's like deeply, deeply personal to us. So I tend to find that those founders are the most exciting to work with, regardless of their backgrounds, because they want to fight tooth and nail, not just from like a monetary outcome, but from like an impact outcome, right? And it's like those days when you're just like you said, like you wake up and then a hard day is going to happen. If you're a mercenary, it gets that much harder to decide to get out of bed. But when you're a missionary and you're like, it's going to be a shitty day today, but I know why I'm here.
Yep.
It's because I need to solve this problem. Yep. You tend to get out of bed more and you tend to just get through it. Right. And I think, maybe there is some sort of correlation between like what your childhood has been like in terms of if you emerge as a mercenary or missionary or not. I've never studied it. This is the first time I ever thought about this question. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's something that I've given thought to in a variety of different ways. And I don't have a lot of those things, but I have some that I think are sort of my edges that have made me want to work harder and be different and put my energy into the world, into what we're doing in things like that. But actually it's a really good segue.
And this is where the place of curiosity question that you had is really interesting, because regardless of the degree of trauma, I think we've all as humans have experienced something where we're just struggling to survive. Right. And when you can accept that with another person, that's when you can invite a little bit of vulnerability, a little bit more depth behind the relationship, and a lot more empathy too. Right. That like, even though it looks good, they may actually be silently suffering in some way. Yeah. Right. And I love those kinds of moments where we can get to that level of comfort to share that.
Yes. And they probably are.
And it doesn't seem related to business, but it does.
I mean, I think with almost every founder, they're struggling in some way or another. Like there's always something that they're like, oh my God, like I can't believe this is happening today. I'm so stressed. There's something going on if you just ask them and they'll tell you about whatever it is, because there's always something in the startup world, at least. But actually, to go into that, it's a good segue when you talk about some of this. I would love to learn a little bit more about going back to your career stuff. We got way sidetracked after barely got through your first job, not even your first job. But like, tell me more about like beat the GMAT. And before we even get to that, I have one statement. Do you know what you share with Ron DeSantis in Beat the GMAT? How you and he are like?
Oh crap! I think someone didn't mention this. Was he a test prep tutor at one point?
He had his own test prep thing for the LSAT for like law.
Right.
To get into Harvard, sort of like LSAT test prep. So I was like, when I was thinking through our call, I was like, oh man, like this is sort of hilarious. Cause I'm guessing you and Ron DeSantis are pretty different. But hey, maybe you're running for the governor of California, and this is your opportunity to announce your candidacy.
Well, other things we got in common. I think we're about the same age as well. Yep.
Have two kids?
We have kids. Yeah, a wife that I think likes us a lot. So
You both live in
yeah, there's
states
that. But
which have ocean on them.
yeah, exactly. So, but the comparison should probably stop at that point. But yeah, no, that's yeah, test prep and the early stages of my career. So again, as I mentioned at the top of this podcast, I never had any intention to become a founder. That wasn't necessarily a goal in the outset, but it kind of just happened. Yeah. And the way that it happened was a little bit unexpected. So during college, I was a mediocre student. Was able to attend a wonderful college, but I think I worked really hard to get there that I decided I'm just going to have an amazing time in college.
Like, I made it in, so, they probably won't kick me out, so I'm just going to enjoy it.
And this is actually one of the big criticisms of like privileged institutions like Ivies or whatever, is just like, it's really easy it's hard to get in, but very easy to get out. Right. Grade inflation, all that stuff. So I fully took advantage of that. Smoked a lot of weed, played a lot of video games, had a lot of fun. I grew up fairly privileged. Like my dad was a surgeon, and that's the reason I could stand on his shoulders to even get into like a college 100%. Like Stanford. So like as a result, I didn't do anything in the summers except for smoke more weed and then play more video games. So by the time my senior year came around, I was like, wait a second. I feel like I am not employable because I have literally done nothing. I've picked majors that don't really seem related to a lot of the careers that I would have interest in tech and so forth, like at that point. So what am I going to do? So call my mom, because I'm a child still, even though I'm 22-year-old. I'm very arrested.
I mean, to be clear, Eric, I still call my mom and dad, right? So it doesn't stop.
Well, I hope that my kids will call me every day when they're in their 40s as well. So now it's cool. But like, I was like, Mom, what am I going to do? And she said to me at the time in her broken English, she's from Korea, like my dad. She's like, look, Eric, you are too dumb to be a doctor or a lawyer. So maybe you should try business. And so no knock on people in business. There's plenty of brilliant folks here. I'm looking at one of them. Again, that's Adam. But I thought I did what every kid does in this situation. It's like, isn't there a school for business? Like, it's called business school, right? MBA programs. And I started to prepare for that. And the first thing that you generally do when you apply to an MBA program is take a look at the standardized exam to get in. It's called the GMAT test. It's sort of like the SATs for undergraduate. It's called GMAT, right? And I would say that I'm a pretty mediocre person in many aspects of life, with the exception of a single superpower that I possess. That is maybe top 1%, if I can brag. I'm really good at standardized tests. It is a useless skill.
It is, but not if you're applying to school, right? If applying to school, like, that is a skill set for getting into good schools.
I hate it though, because like there's a lot of problems when it comes to standardized tests in terms of like correlations of wealthy people doing way better with way more resources than those who have less. Like, I don't believe in this notion of standardizing intelligence in any way. Anyway, whatever. I started to prepare for this GMAT test. I got some books from the library, and then over 60 days, I blogged about what I learned every day. That blog, which was called beatthegmat.blogspot.com, in 2005, ended up becoming a viral sensation in the MBA admissions world. And then that launched a 9-year project unexpectedly for me to eventually turn that blog into a discussion forum. That discussion forum turned into more of a media company, and then a social network, and then in its final incarnation, a data company that was ingesting 90% of MBA applicant data 6 months before these MBA applicants would actually apply to schools, of which I could sell that data for $100,000 licenses, anonymized, to each business school. And but that was 9 years of pivoting, but quite a journey.
But still, I mean, so what did you learn there that you think either you still apply, or that you're like, oh my God, I was a complete idiot, newbie, had no idea what I was doing, that you took from that experience and then have applied, through all the other parts of your career?
Yeah. So a couple lessons here. Actually, the way that I started was unusual. So because I had great friends in college, all my best friends were from college, I was able to get a job. I was able to get an awesome rotational leadership program job at Intuit, making QuickBooks, TurboTax, Quicken, and all those great products. And It was wonderful because that gave me a great set of mental models of what good looked like for marketing, sales, product management, strategy. I was able to rotate in these programs. The first rotation was in customer support in Tucson, Arizona, on the phones for 3
It's a
months.
great learning experience.
Probably one of the best jobs I've ever had in terms of just learning, listening, EQ, communication. And so I bootstrapped my Beat the GMAT business for 3.5 years as I had a paycheck coming in. Lesson number one was, if there's a mechanism for you to bootstrap to avoid like fundraising, I actually think it is great, because sometimes you just need time to iterate on your company, your ideas. It's sort of nice to also not take so much dilution in the beginning as well. But not every business needs to be ultra high growth from day zero, right? And sometimes just a little bit of extra customer discovery with a paycheck and insurance is nice. I've actually done this with every single company subsequently. Was like I generally was doing something else as I was starting the next thing. So, and then the other thing too was just learning how to work with other people from Beat the GMAT. So the controversial thing I really did was I was working with my wife. She was like my core counterpart, girlfriend at the time, eventually became wife. We've been together for 20 years now. Awesome. And the thing that I really got was learning how to delegate well, because that partnership worked. Because I'm going to hand circle things. If you imagine a Venn diagram, let's say that you and your skills are on the left-hand circle, and then your co-founder skills are on the right-hand circle. So long as the skills that you have are complementary and do not overlap too much in the center, I actually think that's a recipe for harmony. The only part that should overlap in that Venn diagram between those two individuals as co-founders is strategy. Like you're aligned on where you're trying to go. But she handled sales, customer success, like crushing it. I'd handle all the product and engineering, basically spending all the money that she made.
Yep.
And it was great, right? So that's been like a big formula when I think about adding more circles to teams of just like, is this someone that can do a contribution to add in terms of like a critical area that we're deeply missing? Yep. And I think about that mapping a lot.
And so is that a mapping that you think about just for any company you've built? Is that sort of mapping number one? And then number two, does that also lead to when you make investments, thinking about like a co-founding team is one of your core criteria? I mean, I don't know if you write it down, like this seems like a team that is super compatible in the right ways and not in sort of a negative overlapping way.
Yeah, and I think that I do think about this a lot because Hustle Fund focuses on pre-seed stage investments, which is the earliest tranche of capital that a venture capitalist will generally put money into. A lot of times these are just like early prototypes that exist, maybe none at all. And it's like co-founders and no team, right? So because there's no data, a lot of it becomes like an EQ exercise of just like, do I think that this is a team that's capable of growing from where they are from the starting point, both in terms of smarts, but also just like the emotional intelligence, which I lean into a lot. And the part that is kind of hard in this job when I think about it in my life, but also the team, is that there's a multiverse of Venn diagrams you can draw. Skills is one of them. The other one could actually just be core values, right? It's just like, is Eric just like a Machiavellian asshole and Adam like, like a really like, high level person, right? That's another one. Another one could also just be even small things that start to get a little bit awkward, like what's the money situation like? Yeah. If Eric is desperate for cash and will take like a $1 million payout because he needs to service some things in his life, which is fine, and Adam's trying to build like a huge unicorn, then there's going to be some thrash at some point because there wasn't an understanding of that kind of level of complementarity too. Yeah. So I've lived that one actually specifically. So really,
yeah, one of my former co-founder for a company, he had very different focus areas for what he wanted to do, for what he needed, and it led to, I would say, probably it massively reduced the potential outcome we could have had with the company.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking sometimes, like when you're on one end of it versus the other, right? But being able to like identify that was really great. And with all the subsequent companies that happened afterwards, there were like 3 or 4 others. They just got easier and easier because like I think my sense of people, how to work with them and communicate, just like it's all additive in this wonderful journey. So at different times, just in terms of like the personal career side of it, I had some stints at larger companies like Facebook and Instagram, but a lot of it were my own media businesses that I just like enjoyed running, leading up to Hustle Fund in 2017. And yeah, here I am as like a grizzly, it's my fifth company founder who is absolutely having a lot of fun now.
And so walk me through, like, going up to present day is perfect. What did it mean when you started Hustle Fund? What were key lessons that you took and you're like, okay, I want to make sure we do this right. Here are things I want to do when it's just you and your other two co-founders, and now building a business that has essentially, like, millions of dollars of revenue in a sense. You're in control of many millions more of that. You have a big team who's reliant on you making sure the company does well. What are key qualities or things that you think you've done as an entrepreneur that have made this really your probably biggest success to date, and certainly will be your biggest one in your life? What are those qualities?
Thank you, man. And that especially means a lot coming for you, because you know how much I respect you as a person, but also just as someone who deeply thinks about tech in our space. So I think the number one thing that I think about when it comes to the construction of Hustle Fund is it aligning to my value of trying to solve for joy every day? And the number one source of that will be the selection of the people.
Yep.
Right. So we have a pretty good culture, I'd say, at Hustle Fund that's driven by kindness, a lot of authenticity, but also a lot of transparency. So I'm rarely surprised by about anything. If a bad thing's happening, whatever, like I generally get to see it coming pretty early so we can resolve it. And if it's an environment that feels pretty safe for the 37 people that work here today, just, for us to contribute ideas, regardless of level and so forth. The part that solving for joy for me means is when we hire someone on our team, I need to feel conviction that this could be someone in a role, but also right kind of skills, but also ambition, where this could be their last job too. Mm-hmm. I'm really motivated to help these people that we bring into the Hustle Fund group to feel like they want to stay here for the rest of their careers, minimum 10 years. And as part of that too is also an underlying belief of just like, not only will we have a lot of great time building here, but I want my teammates to all get super rich because of their time here at Hustle Fund, where it's just a no-brainer with the right kind of environmental flexibility and all that stuff too. So there's a lot of rules in terms of that I've seen, and this is a bit of a criticism of like Reid Hoffman. He's got this book called like The Alliance and things like that. It's just like, think about like these contracts with employees in like 1 to 2 year kind of regime, sort of similar to like military contracts, and then just like sprint and then set. That's one way of doing it. But when you go really, really long term about trying to dream the next 10 years of a career with someone, you can immediately feel a little bit more relaxation, but also a lot more safety, right? So that people feel like they can contribute their ideas or cite problems. It's just like a different kind of lens to the world, and frankly, a huge psychological relief for me, because being a founder, you really got to think about like what's in front of you a lot, or it's very easy to create that short-sightedness, like the nearsighted vision of just like, I got to get through this week. I got to close this client, or this retention conversations next week. We got to make sure this person retains. I always felt like I didn't get enough slow thinking time, which is what this job does afford. And that's a massive privilege.
The slow thinking one's an interesting one. And how do you then actually, on that note, I mean, how do you recommend to all your portfolio companies that they find time for that slow thinking and take yourself out of it? Because I know as a founder myself, it's really difficult for me to find time. I mean, I've basically been on calls all day as an example. And I now, at the end of the day today for us, on a Friday when we're recording this, I'm now finally going to jump into Slack, see what's there. Then maybe if I have time, go look at email. And then tonight I actually have a dinner I'm going to. And there goes my night. So guess what? Now my work bleeds into the weekend pretty quickly, and I don't have as much time with my kids. And next thing you know, you're behind massively. And I try to be good about this stuff, but man, it's really difficult. And I don't even have any time for that sort of slow thinking that really helps me be strategic about where we go as a business.
Yo, Adam, I appreciate this question so much, because I think you're speaking for probably almost everyone that's going to be listening to this podcast today. Just because it is like the biggest challenge. You and I have 2 awesome kids, got great wives. I know that we've had many conversations about the value of trying to be as present as possible for our families too. And you're an awesome friend to me and many other friends. Like, these are all things that aren't related to the work. I'm putting air quotes as I speak to that, but it's actually part of the life, right? And I'd say that there's a few things that have happened when it comes to slow thinking that hasn't helped for me. One is I can just start with my family. Every year we hold an annual meeting on Christmas Day, December 25, and then we do a retrospective on how the year went. We actually have every year a written set of values that we want to try to follow for the ensuing years. So just like a PM doing retrospectives for your family, you do like, how did it go? How are we right now? And then what do we want to do for the future? Like start, stop, continue kind of stuff, right? And, we will write down a new set of values. And this is a family exercise. Like my daughter is 5, but last year when she was 4, she participated, right? And some of the things from kids are kind of hilarious. It's just like, one year my son was like, can we do more role playing around Star Wars? I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, well, that's not really a value, but let's write it down because let's make sure that you feel some ownership about this, right? When he's like 17 and he says that, I'll be like, that's not a value, dude. Like I'll push back probably harder. So I think that understanding and just like inviting like the reality of my work, and my wife's an entrepreneur too, to my kids, like is a starting point. Mm-hmm. Part 2 though is this is something that even now I would say like I just have begun to appreciate are fucking vacations. Yeah. I'm not talking about like the weekend away. I'm talking about like 2 weeks. Right. And that sounds like an enormous amount of time because it is. And I'm also saying this as a VC, so I'm playing into the stereotypes of VCs being on vacation all the time. But like I push a lot of our founders to take breaks. Like when it's like a team retreat, do it in a different location, get out of your house, and then like, enjoy a different kind of environment, which can juice new ideas. Vacations are crazy because like in the first week, you're not really on vacation, on a 2-week vacation. You're kind of still letting the cortisol drain out of you slightly and still doing some emails. I actually think you start to enjoy yourself in week 2. So that's why I say 2 weeks. Yep. And like that does start to invite a bit more slow thinking, especially if you can time it during whatever seasonally slow part of your respective industry. And I think the third thing was just like a lot of practice of gratitude. So the problem I think with like short-term thinking is cortisol levels are high all the time. Everything feels like an emergency. And then all these other things, again, it's just like nearsighted vision. But my favorite thing that we have in our team Slack is a channel called Shoutouts, which is probably one of our most heavily used areas. It's just people with big or small things who are recognizing other people on the team for something cool that they did. And I gotta say, like when I need to feel a little bit more like slow down my mind, I like to go into that channel because it's often a celebration of like a huge effort that someone or some sort of effort that someone's put in, and it reminds me of how far we've come, right? In the last week, months, years, whatever it is. But I can keep going forever, but like the last thing I'll mention is just develop hobbies. Again, these all sound like things that your VC or would be counter to what a VC or your investor or yourself would think about. I started to get into DJing just for myself. I practice that 30 minutes every day. These are just things that like I want to do just for myself. Right. And if you start to tie your identity too much to your company, which almost all of us have done at some point, it is a recipe for burnout, for just depression, all these other things. But the reality, Adam, for you, as I look at you, dude, regardless of what you do with Levy or anything else you do in your career, if you had to stop today and then flip burgers at Burger King tomorrow, your wife, your kids, Eric Bahn, we'd still love you for who you are.
Thank you.
Right? Yeah. It's not about like your success here in this company, which will be successful probably, but like it's about you, right? And we forget that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I appreciate so much of that. I mean, like it actually really resonates. One, I'm going to make sure I really want to start doing a family retro. I love that idea in general.
Your boys are starting to get to that age where they can definitely participate too.
For sure. My oldest one especially. The youngest one's too young still. But but I think it'd be great to do. I think probably healthy for my wife and I to do that. I think getting the hobbies is a really good point. It's difficult. I mean, I actually have a thesis that you can only do really 2 things really well in life. And now a hobby doesn't mean you have to do it well. Of course, that's sort of the thing. You don't actually need to do your hobby well. You just need to enjoy it. But I feel like I only have time essentially for like work and family. And if I'm lucky, some friend stuff. And that's about it in many cases.
Well, you and I are so similar, man, because I think I feel like that a lot. until I had a conversation with my wife and kids about this in the last year. I was like, look, kids, wife, I'm going to just reveal that I feel really guilty. Like I work a lot of hours during the day. I travel a lot. And, I feel like every minute is an opportunity cost away from you. And, but as a result, like I'm feeling a little bit sad about this too. Cause like there's things I want to explore about my life. And I had just a frank conversation with them about this. And they're like, you, dad or husband, need to do things for yourself because it's important for you. And we want that for you. When I realized that like my family wants this for me, they want me to end every day playing for generally 25 minutes of DJing in the garage just by myself. They want that for me. Right. And I think like these are scripts that I've had to untangle in over 4 decades of just like, I gotta be the dad that shows up or the husband. But I think I'm pushing back on you, man. I want that for you. I suspect your family does too.
You're probably right. All I can ask for that and that point is I want to make sure I'm invited to the first Eric Bahn rave. Like I'm there. So sign me up. Yeah, probably a family friendly one. So let me know when.
So it's very wholesome. Don't worry about that.
I'm ready for it. So Eric, I love the idea of hobbies, finding time for those things, but actually it goes to a question that I think a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle with, which is how do you actually create that time in your life? Because there's always something else. There's always something more you can be doing. There's all those extra things. So what advice do you give to yourself personally, to the entrepreneurs you work with and founders to be a great entrepreneur? You need to be able to focus really well. And there's so many things that are competing for your time and attention. How do you give yourself, prioritize properly, get yourself out of that mindset? Like I know there's a million emails and Slack messages I need to get back to. For me personally, I know I'm not going to get to all of them. I'm just not. But like, what advice do you give people to handle the deluge of stuff that is heading your way always, every day as an entrepreneur?
This is a really common question, or a really common topic I have with founders, especially those who are first-time founders, because they tend to, if you're younger with less obligations, you tend to fill all of your time with just grinding, right? There's no weekends. You and I have been there with like our earlier careers, and like, and sometimes even with the current careers too. But the top thing that I like to, there's 2 things do with founders when I talk to them. One is, the first question I'll always ask them is, how's your mental health? You've been a founder with me before, and you've probably heard that question a few times, but I like that question specifically because if it's like, how are you doing? You're going to get a canned response like, fine, right? If it's how's your mental health, it generally backfoots people of like, I probably can't give a bullshit answer here. And if you establish enough safety in the course of the relationship, you'll hear something, right? And it's good to just hold a little space with them to talk through that. And to remind them that like whatever they're feeling is valid and normal and okay. And if there's something I can do to help you unblock that feeling, if it's negative, like I'm here to listen and assist. But I think the other thing too is just like, I have a new joke this year in 2023 that I've been saying a lot to founders and even to my family, which is like, if you're starting a new company, the first 10 years is the hardest.
I by the way, I can only imagine your family just rolling their eyes at Eric, like, let's do the family retro. Let's now talk about like my business joke isms. And like, I'm sure they find you to be the goofiest, loveliest, most wonderful dad in the world. And I think it's hilarious. Well, thanks
for assuming that. After you say it enough, because I do repeat myself a lot, it's just like, please stop. So like, I think they're at that point too. But like the first 10 years is the hardest. Like unpacking that is just like, for Levy, this is a company that's like a year old.
Yeah.
Like the IPO is not going to happen until like year 7 to 10, possibly 15, if ever, right? Because the way things are going, by the way, I hope you just run this thing forever because like it's going great. But it takes time to build huge businesses or something that has great impact. And I remind our founders all the time that it's okay to give yourself permission to have a little bit of balance in your life. Like, you don't want to be someone that's like a billionaire, but dies alone and miserable. That's not living, right? Why not be a billionaire with like a rich family, and I don't mean like monetarily rich. I'm talking about just like deep connections, like, great, interesting hobbies about yourself and a real life lived, because a single dimensional life is not a life. Right. So I think it bears repeating over and over again, which is just like what you're trying to create founders, even in high growth Silicon Valley, is going to take a lot of time to get to even the liquidity event. And then even after the liquidity event, there's going to be maybe another couple decades. Who knows, right? So don't forget to live life, because I would be enormously sad if I didn't marry the person that I married, or had kids, or, started my DJing career in my early 40s, so that by the time I'm like 55 or early 50s and I'm doing like your kids like bar mitzvahs, DJ minivan dad, they'll be like the sickest beats ever, right? Because I had the time of building up to that for a decade.
And so actually it's funny you say this stuff, right? So I met with and I'm actually kind of curious your take on this too, is I had lunch earlier this week with a fairly well-known sort of VC in person in our world. And it'd been a long time since I really caught up with him. And he's someone I've known basically my entire career. And basically started the conversation with, he's getting divorced, has 2 kids, getting divorced, all that stuff. Didn't know this. But I sort of asked like what was going on. And he told me the story, and what I found really, and he basically said part of it was, certainly COVID didn't help, but like he was really deep in his career, and sort of you're in this part of your career, I think, especially between maybe like 35 to 45, where you're starting a family, you're at the peak earnings, peak career, you're pushing yourself in every way. That's your focus. And you kind of want the other things to just be there for you and be stable and ready, but it's really difficult to control that. It might be different if you're a 22-year-old founder, but how would you, one, react to that, but then also two, what is the advice when you give to great entrepreneurs to say, hey, like you can balance these things properly and still build a great company? Because it's a difficult idea, because you want to work hard. And frankly, some employers expect you to work really hard. If you want to be the tippity top of things, like the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, they got there because they worked harder than everybody else. And they probably have a terrible home life in many cases. What are the things that we should emulate as entrepreneurs? It's different, entrepreneurs versus sort of a life success, and hopefully you can have it all. And I think you and I both do in a lot of ways, and we're really privileged because of it. But how do you parse those two things? Because, by the way, I'll end the last part. He mentioned the moment he started telling his friends about this, and he said a ton of people came out of the woodwork and asked him. They said, "I'm going through the same thing. We'd love to talk to your divorce lawyer, your couples counselor, things like that." And it's sort of, he was like shocked. He's like, I had no idea this was going on with so many people. And it turned out there's a huge number of people in this high powered level of the world who were going through really similar things. And maybe they hadn't gone to the school of Eric Bahn and gotten your life advice, but what are things you would tell those people who are maybe not into this and thinking, man, like that's kind of me right now?
Yeah, my heart goes out to your buddy here. It's awful, and it kind of goes back to, I think, the conversation we had at the top of this a little bit earlier too. Just like everyone's struggling to survive. Someone could look at his life and be like, "Wow, you invest in all these great companies, you have all this money, you have
his career. He's crushed it in his career. Like he literally crushed it."
But I mean, this is not a question for you to answer. But it's like the rhetorical question is like, would I trade my life for that? If like it meant that like I lose my spouse or relationships along the way, and it's a hard one, right? So, okay, I'll put it this way, which is I go through rough patches with my wife too, but it's I think it's rooted because of when I start to treat love as a noun versus a verb. You should always treat love as a verb. And this actually does have relevance to this broader conversation here too. So noun is just like, we believe that like a fixed mindset of like our marriage is just like, it's great, it exists, and like it is an institution that is unbreakable. Yep. The reality is just like using this like institution or like building metaphor, like you don't leave like a beautiful house and not maintain it. It's going to crumble to its foundation quicker than you think, right? So love as a verb is a lesson that I learned pretty early in my life, which is you constantly have to put in effort, right? And then you have to show effort. My love language is acts of service, right? Like that's how I like to express myself the most. My wife understands that too. So like that for me can come in even small things. Like I try to plan a date afternoon every 2 weeks. Like we'll take a long lunch, probably 2.5 hours, And then maybe that we can sneak in a movie, but it's often just like a great meal and just time
Mhm.
together, or play pickleball or something like that. And then like, or just like every month is like a date night, with our nanny. I do all this stuff. It's tiny things, but I'm just trying to show like, I'm not going to give up on this thing with my kids. Like those activities, I got to invest in it. After this, I'm actually going to drive and go get Wingstop, 100 pieces of chicken to see my college friends and then all their kids, because I want to get the food for them. Right. So like, it's the love is a verb kind of part. The thing that's really interesting is when it comes to personal relationships. Okay, let's put it this way. In professional relationships, if like I'm a direct report to you, Adam, I know how you are as a manager. You're so good at setting a social contract at the beginning of like, here's how we're going to work together. Here are my expectations. What are your expectations? How are we going to measure how things are going over time? We rarely have those kind of conversations with our wives and husbands, our significant others, our kids. That's what that retrospective is for. But like that may be the most important set of stakeholders to have those conversations with. So related to all this is just like, the way that I start to get balance is I check in with my family on a very honest level. And I just put them into the mindset of like, I need to have a conversation with you about like how I'm doing these days, like in terms of like my priorities, and like, are you getting enough attention and so forth. Or like, I'm about to go fundraising for the next 3 months. Like I'm going to be away and this is what you're going to expect out of me. Right. And it's just like no surprises at home and with their friends, just like no surprises that you want at work. And it starts to help.
Yeah.
But like the big part of it is just like, just at work as in home, like I try to treat love as a verb.
Yeah.
Right. Demonstrate that I'm willing to act for you.
I love that. But then how do you translate that into, once again, that founder who's also working, like their company is their key thing too, right? So how do you only, I mean, maybe everyone's love is infinite to some extent, but it's sort of not, you don't have time to verbally give that love everywhere that you need to give it. So how do you find the time as what do you tell an entrepreneur where you only have so much love to give? Do you give that love to your family, which is critical to maybe your long-term life happiness sort of, but then also you have to give that love to your company, right? I need to spend time giving love to my direct reports, giving love to my company, my team, all these other things. There are lots of things vying for my love and attention, and I only have so much time in a day.
So one of the things I always do, I try to make dinner every day, and I'm very good about it with the family, is we always go around and talk about what happened during our day. For our kids, we kind of give them a cop out. They usually just share one thing, but I go into detail. I'm just like, I have a limited partner, an investor who's like asking for like a lot of stuff right now. And like, it is overwhelming me right now. Right. Or just like, I had to talk to a founder who's going through like a massive like psychological issue right now because of the stress. And like, I had to help coach that person or at least like get them some resources to get some help. And like the more I sort of give, the more they seem to be listening.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about my kids mostly. My wife is really good at this too. So at least like they have a pretty good sense directionally of what's going on professionally in my life and why I'm so passionate about this work too. So making the time, I don't know, man. Like the thing that usually I trade off on is sleep, which is terrible, right? Because I know that you want to live to be 130.
120,
120
is the goal.
Okay, 120. I padded a little bit because I think you can make it. But and like I know that's actually trading off something, right? But a very serious like end of life kind of health concern actually. But I build time back for myself usually at the trade off of sleep. Like I love being by myself late at night kind of stuff. But it's a struggle. I wish I had an answer for you, but every day is just a little experiment. And it helps to have good friends like you, Adam, where we have very honest conversations of things that we try.
Yeah.
Right. So I learn from you. I learn from my other buddies.
Yeah.
And I try to be as open about it as possible what I'm struggling with.
Yeah. Which that honesty, once again, goes back to the point of you saying like, this is how you actually build relationships and build the things that help you grow and be privileged and be in the position we're in today in general is because that vulnerability and who you are. And then so going back to, I mean, kind of the question, right, is like, as an entrepreneur, like if you think through all the startups you've seen, right, and I don't know if you have a number on that right now, like you've probably seen thousands of pitches, invested in hundreds of companies. You've seen a small, despite you being a professional and frankly a really good professional at this sort of this business of venture capital and investing. What what are the key qualities that have led to the quote unquote biggest successes?
Yeah. I'm going to bring it down to both EQ and transparency, and maybe velocity. I'll throw in the third. So let's talk about EQ. One is you want to work with people who are growth mindseted.
Yep.
Right. So there's a great book about growth mindset by Carol Dweck. She's one of the kind of coined it. Fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Fixed mindset is just like the world is the way that it is, and there's nothing I can do to change it. It tends to draw a little bit more of like a skeptical view in the characters that really kind of index towards that worldview. Growth mindset is just like the world is constantly mutable, and I can be too. Right. It almost like starts from like a position of humility of like I can be better too. Right. And or I can learn something new too. This is classic Adam Spector stuff. Right. So like yes. Growth mindset, I can always be better. Yep. Right. And I think like, being able to hopefully isolate working with founders who have that view, they tend to be the most exciting and wonderful to work with, because they don't hold their views with such high ego that if you challenge them on something else or a different way of thinking about it, that they reject it. No, instead, like a high EQ kind of growth mindseted kind of person, I think is better at just processing, ingesting, and feeling gratitude towards new ideas. So I'd say like 100% of the best companies that we work with out of our 500 portfolio companies, those that are really achieving the best results start with that. So that's growth mindset, high EQ. I think transparency is really important too. I don't know why this is the case, but those who are hyper consistent when it comes to their monthly and quarterly updates, but also with the depth in those updates, it's not just like we're going good, but it's like here are all the metrics, the good, bad, the ugly. That's also like this kind of willingness of vulnerability that's attractive to me, that ties to EQ. Just like no surprises. This is like an early warning sign of a problem that's coming. Here's some other successes. Here's where we can use your help. That's something that maybe 10% of our founders stick with over the long term.
Yeah.
Out of 500 that we've invested in a hustle fund over 7 years, right? That's like, or 6 or 7 years. That's kind of nuts to me. But I think if you get into that practice of just like being comfortable of being uncomfortable with like these things that you have to share on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, that does a lot to endear you to this ecosystem that's trying to support you. And then finally is velocity. So velocity is, we used to say speed. Speed is great, but someone, I think it was Elizabeth, who was an electrical engineer, was like, we probably should call this velocity, because velocity is speed plus direction.
Yep.
When I worked at Meta many years ago, one of my favorite propaganda posters, they always put like little sayings and aphorisms on wall posters, was don't mistake speed for progress. And it was a picture of a rocking chair. Right. So like
Meta also Facebook also had the saying of go fast and break things, right? Or move fast and break things was one.
Yeah, they started to wind that
I know,
down,
but that was a thing for a long time,
yeah.
Right? In the early days.
It was. And like there's a little bit behind that too, which is like, speed, velocity is like, with the time that I have, can I actually optimize the throughput of my work to better and better degrees of output? And what I find actually about like the very best portfolio companies that I get to work with is it doesn't actually seem like they're working a crazy number of hours, but their output is like 10x as a team than like any other team in our portfolio. And I'm thinking specifically of this one. I'm going to name names here. Okay. Yeah. One of my favorite founders I've ever worked with is Tara Viswanathan. She's a founder of a medical infrastructure company called Rupa Health. Yeah. And she does daily writing in the diary. She does that. She has an insane exercise routine. She's like unbelievably fit. She goes on solo weekend vacations almost on a quarterly basis just to do slow thinking, writing, reading. She strikes me as someone that is so healthy. Her EQ is crazy high, just like always easy to get vulnerable with. And then Rupa is spectacular. The company is doing so well. It's going to IPO, I'm sure, and do really wonderful things for her team and everyone else. And I look up to founders like her. I try to ask her all the time, like, how do I be more like you? Because she is constantly trying to grow herself into better balance or other kinds of experimentation and so forth, and builds in that slow thinking. But her velocity is also really good. Like, even though I'm convinced she's not usually working more than like 50-hour weeks. This is a guess, Tara. I don't know. You may be doing a lot more than that. She and her team and the output that I see with each update, which are amazing. These are 70-page updates every quarter, right? Like intense, but she puts in the time because she wants to have a lot of alignment. Mm-hmm. It's spectacular. I can't do what she does as a founder because she's just that good. Right. So I think those kinds of three things.
What does she tell you are her secrets? Like what is her secret to that? Is it she's really good at delegating and hiring fantastic people? Because she can't do it all, so she has to trust her team. Like what is her secret, or what tell us what she tells you. Share the knowledge.
First and foremost, she reads all the time.
So that goes back to your original thing that we talked about, right? Reading and writing and storytelling being such a critical element, which goes to
she's constantly texting me like summaries of books, or even buying me books that like are meaningful to her. So like always questioning the mental models and trying to see whether there's something better to be done out there. I think the second thing too is she is driven by values. So like she's super clear about how she wants to run her life, but this sort of extends into the culture of Rupa. Right. When you're there, you can sense that something is a little bit different there. They're people that take the work so seriously, but they do not take themselves very seriously at all. And like I've seen like these retreats and stuff that they're on, like there's so much trust among the team that like it gives people permission to take a lot of risk there. Right. Because they're not going to be like dressed down if like something doesn't work. Like that's just what it is. Like this
they have permission to fail sort of and do experiments.
Yeah. And I think the last thing is just she's like a crazy good listener. I mean, sometimes I'll have conversations with her and then she's like, let me process this. And she's just silent for 2 minutes. And then she'll come back with like a perspective. Right. I mean, it takes a level of like intestinal fortitude to be like silent with your investor for 2 minutes in a live call and just saying, I'm processing. Right. Because she just wants to be really thoughtful about like how she responds to the important things, right? So she's one example. Tara, if you're listening to this, I'll try to send this recording to you later. Yeah. You're such a big hero of mine.
It sounds like maybe I should have her on the show and get the take directly from her.
You should have her on the show. She's a phenom. You two would be best friends. I know.
I will follow up after this and ask for that intro. And then, but going, so the velocity piece, like I love that idea, but walk me through like, I guess when founders think about velocity, right, you sort of talked about Webflow and how they waited years and years and years before they even raised their first round, which means they slowed themselves down, right? Almost by default, you don't take money until you're really ready to go fast. How does that velocity mindset apply to companies that are saying, we're going to take our time to really get product market fit right before we go fast?
Yeah. So in the case of Webflow, that's an interesting one vis-a-vis, I guess, like within the context of that question. So the problem with Webflow was they probably launched a little bit too early, right? So they had more time to do development and kind of run as a bootstrap company because no code development just took a long time for people in the mainstream to take hold and like accept that this is a great way of actually building stuff. Right. So Vlad, like he actually started Webflow back in 2007, the early carnation of it. I put in my check in 2013, right, when they were first putting together their seed raise. Right. So he was at that point working at Intuit for like 7-8 years or something like that, or 6 years. And then had just got rejected by YC for the second time or something. Like when I wrote my check.
They're lost.
Well, they got in third time, and now YC touts them as one of the best companies ever backed, like in the top 100 or 50 lists every time. And then they just sort of built a big community of designers. Like they got like millions of people on their newsletters that were like web designers and so forth, people in agencies. They just really focused on developing the customers until the revolution happened. I think it was large part because they found the right gatekeepers of Webflow to evangelize it and then turn it into like this amazing mainstream product that it is. So the nature of the industry by which you select also dictates speed to some degree, right? Like if you and I were to create a new AI LLM company, my guess is that this is such a crazy land grab. It may make sense for us to raise tons of money so that we can like get our reach as big as possible. But if it's more about like maybe like creating a new industry.
Yeah.
Like Webflow argued would sort of doing that kind of thing, or even a product that's quite novel, but in an industry that tends to move slower, like hardware. Let's say that you and I are going to create new like second stage rockets for Tesla, or sorry, for SpaceX, or equivalent like rocket manufacturers or something like that. That's like what we want to do. We're not going to do that in the first year, right? That's like a 10-year, 15-year project, maybe even, to get to like the first thing out to space. That actually has a big factor there too. But I'll also start with this, or just end with this, which is, I think the majority of companies I see shouldn't get venture money.
Yep.
Like, oftentimes it's like the market's too small, or like these other factors, or just the dilution won't make sense versus like just working at Google as an engineer for 10 years. So I often have to run through that use case of just like, you might be better off just not doing any VC. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with this like weaponized term, which is like lifestyle business. Can you get this to a state where you're making $1 million, let's say, with a relatively small team, and it's like high margin, you have full ownership, and then you just do this for a number of years? Like, you will get really, really wealthy. And that's going to be maybe an easier path to entrepreneurship than the expectations of these high growth VCs and all the pressure that comes with that, right? So,
well, what you're describing, right? I mean, largely, I know we're mostly focused on sort of early stage venture backed entrepreneurs, but the truth is the large majority of businesses in the US and the world are not venture backed businesses. They are small.
Yeah.
They're startups. They are entrepreneurs, amazing, smart entrepreneurs, and they are small startups, just like everything else. But they're doing it with their blood, sweat, and tears, and in slowly building something into something real. So even to those folks, like, what do you tell them? It's like, okay, like, forget the venture funding. Is it just, hey, stick with it, knuckle down, get it right, know your customer. I don't care if you're building a great restaurant or you're building the next AI company. Know your customer, and then maybe, I don't know, the takeaway I take from you always is sort of create joy or spark joy, create delight, and that will lead to success at whatever you do.
Never guaranteed, but like, also there's let's talk about, like, for whatever reason this triggered like a series of thoughts about sources of capital. So venture is a source of capital. If you've been in business long enough and you have some level of profitability for a sustained period of time, call it like 3 to 5 years, don't forget to just go down to your local Wells Fargo bank branch, and then ask for like a line of credit. You know, I in my first company tried to raise money. I only wanted to get $250,000, and no angel would invest at all. So that's why I had to bootstrap. But then one day, literally after I ate some ramen in San Mateo, California, this is back like 2010, even, like, so we're in the Great Recession still. I was like, I'm just going to stop by this Chase Bank branch and see what happens. And I walked out within 1 hour with $250,000 line of credit.
So right? The secret, like, look for alternatives or eat ramen and then ask for money.
Yeah. Ramen's always good to eat, but you know, it's high sodium, so be careful. But like, I mean, like, there's SBIC loans, there's DARPA grants. I mean, like, there's non-dilutive sources of capital everywhere. People like to go to venture first because maybe it seems like a sexier avenue, but I would say it's a little bit more of a punishing avenue in terms of like the ownership that's extracted, the expectations that are set, and so forth. So exhaust the alternatives and then think about venture last. Yeah. And when venture works, it will work. Or it can work, right? Like, with the right partners and the right kind of, I guess, network that like a VC can provide. Sometimes it's highly appropriate, right? But yeah, I mean, going slower is not a negative thing either. If you want to bootstrap for a little longer, if you just decide that I just don't like venture capitalists, that's actually pretty legit. I mean,
venture capitalists are also known as vulture capitalists, right? There's the a term that people use. So,
and there's something to that too. Like, one of the big reasons I decided to start Hustle Fund was I hated all the VCs I ever spoke to. Right? Like, straight up, they were disrespectful or dismissive or ghosting, rude. And if we had a chance to build like a fund that had more humanity, responsiveness, kindness, and like true value add in the form of our network and education and angel networks and so forth, we thought that we could do something that was a little bit healthier. But did I want to become a VC? This is not quite the question, but like, The answer was I never wanted to be a VC. Do I find a lot of purpose in this work? I absolutely find so much purpose in this work. And as a result, I find myself to be really happy.
Well, and that's maybe the secret to any entrepreneur is finding purpose in your work leads to happiness. And for you, that was a really good path. I think I saw a tweet from you recently basically saying like, it's an easier path in some ways to be a VC and not be an operator. And maybe that's part of why you wanted to even go do it. It's because being an operator, you're in it every day and you're fighting every single day. And for you, you get to talk with tons of startups every day. And yet they'll come to you with their problems. But in the end, it's sort of like, it's like maybe analogy is like you're a parent, of course. And so you get this, it's like, you might love playing with my kids, but in the end, like they're coming back to me
Exactly.
when the real problems hit the fan. Just like grandparents come and play and visit with the kids, but they're coming back to me. They're my problem. And so you get to talk to all these founders and their child is their startup. That is where they're an entrepreneur and you get to give them advice and say, okay, good luck. Come back to me in a month. Let me know how it went.
I mean, being an allocator is unequivocally easier, right? Even starting a fund is unequivocally easier than starting a company. I just find that it's way easier for me to disassociate my personal identity with like the fund's work. There's a portfolio of businesses. So with the expectation that many aren't going to make it, that's fine. That's actually how venture works is the critical few do make it. So psychologically, it's a lot easier. But I do have a plea for those who are listening today. Many of you are going to go on to have a lot of success, hopefully because of the great advice that you're hearing through Adam in the series. And what I hope you do is when it's your turn to become a venture capitalist or an allocator, you do indeed join me on this side of the table, because we could always use really good humans on this side who have high empathy with the journey of being a founder, and especially those who represent more voices and backgrounds, right? Outside Silicon Valley, especially. Mm-hmm. So that would be a great outcome. We can make this industry full of wonderful human beings, but we're going to need some help. And I think it's going to just be step one is listen to the advice you hear in the series that Adam put together, and then make a lot of money, and then let's VC together.
I mean, I love that. It feels like that's a perfect ending, but I don't want to end it yet because I have one other question for you, which is like, as we're building up that group of people to create better allocators and expand that up, and we talked about how do you expand yourself as a founder and leader, I would love for you to talk about something that I saw you talk about recently, which is the idea of building for your partner, Elizabeth, the AI bot Donkey for her and essentially expanding her and her advice that she can give, because there's only so many people you can talk to one-on-one. Does that change the game for people, or does that just create in some ways more noise? Like, I think it'd be great to have Elizabeth bot that I can talk to all the time, but what does that mean for every entrepreneur in a sense? Like, can you then multiply yourself over and over and over again in some ways using AI or technology or just better prioritization in life?
Yeah. Thank you for raising Donkey, which is Elizabeth Yin, my co-founder's AI bot that soon everyone is going to be able to engage with. I didn't mean to actually talk about this during this interview, but I think it's going to be fine too. I'm going to blow up the spot of the person who's actually building it. It's a guy named Ryan Endicott. He's a friend of ours within the Angel Squad community, which is a community of angels that Hustle Fund helps curate as well. Lovely human being, really talented builder. So he's actually the one that's building it. And
I feel like I need to talk to him. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, you should. The idea is this, we're talking about time and how difficult it is to balance time. And the reality is that even today, I don't have that much time. Most of my meetings, just like you, are back-to-backs. And I need to preserve some time for myself, or else I will not be able to continue to do this job. So, and we have 500 portfolio companies. We see 1,000 deals per month. So the way that we scale up, I think, is, first of all, what we've been doing for years at Hustle Fund, which is put out lots and lots of content. Mm-hmm. So we do our own videos, we do our own newsletters, articles, lots and lots of advice that's out there in our voice. But one of the benefits of being so forward with content is that you actually are creating a really good training set for LLMs and bots to actually, consolidate this stuff into an AI that you can engage mm-hmm. with. And Elizabeth is a prolific content creator going back over a decade. Yep. So all this information is being ingested, and it actually has created an early bot in her voice that is actually surprisingly good, right? Not Turing test good. I can tell it's a bot, but it's kind of getting, it far exceeded my expectations. So that's something that we plan to release. And I do think that this could be a really good resource for founders in the future, those that may not have circles of privilege or network to get easily in front of VCs or people in Silicon Valley may have a chance to at least initially engage and get some personalized advice through these kinds of AIs. And selfishly, one thing that gets me excited is like our team just being so content forward for so many years kind of does have a little bit of an advantage in that we can train these kinds of bots a little bit easier. So if you're a VC listening to this, or even a founder, think about more building in public stuff. As you get more settled into your business, it may not hurt to reveal a little bit of how you do your work, and that can actually have really cool unintended consequences of other kinds of AI use cases and so forth. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on the AI front, and along with all the investment in AI
I think,
and all that.
and those things will end up really, I think, changing who we are and like enabling us to expand ourselves in many ways. And without going too far down the road, I've actually thought about doing something similar for myself. If anything, just to the point of like me wanting to live for a long time and sort of the longevity train. Even if I do or don't actually live in this sort of body this way, I actually have the same thing. Like I have 15, 20, whatever. I got like the first Kindle. So I have all my highlights going back from like the very first Kindle that I ever had. So all things I highlight in every book. I have everything that I've read, all the articles that I've liked, I've saved them in Evernote and other places for whatever, 15 plus years. Every email, of course, I was one of the first early users of Gmail. All my emails, all my GChat conversations, I actually saved my AOL Instant Messenger conversations. I want to feed that into a bot. And then, of course, thank you for participating in this. I'm creating, if no one else gets anything from this, my kids or my grandkids might someday to see these videos and see what Adam was doing. So thank you for being a part of that. Hopefully nothing happens to me, but if they ever do, like there's a record of who I am and what I'm thinking. And it's nice to know that even though every single individual is creating our own ripples in the pond, and we're going to live on through our friends and family and everyone else we're with, there's other stuff out there that, including maybe a bot of the Adam bot someday, that can be a part of it.
I'm really excited about that use case in particular, right? Which is just like speaking to your ancestors. And now actually we're in a world where doing that's going to be so easy. I'm at an age now where I remember distinctly when my dad was my age. And I constantly use that as a reference point when I'm talking to my son, whom I remember being his age. He's 8 right now. So like when I'm talking to him or coaching him or something like that, I always think about like, what did my dad say to me in these kinds of moments at this time? And then what am I going to choose to say? Right. But if there comes a point where, what does grandpa or great grandpa, great grandpa Adam have to say? And you can call up a video of him when he was 40 years old or something, even talking or about this topic. That in itself is like a direct connection to a ghost. Right. And I can't imagine what that would feel like, for our ancestors later. So I know it's not quite on the hustle fund operations side of the original question, but that's a really exciting feature too, right? That we can finally do something with all of these data that we've been naturally collecting about ourselves. It finally can be used or something like this that I think anyone can train.
So maybe the way to kind of wrap things up, and we've gone way over time, and I appreciate all those things because it's always fun to do this with you, Eric, and chat.
Likewise, man.
But how do we, what going back to that sort of one question, like if there's one thing to break it down on for an entrepreneur, like true entrepreneurial excellence, is it what we just got into, which is this just, you could tell by our voices, optimism for the future, right? AI is going to make us live forever. Like there's optimism in that, in excitement. Like I can't wait to see what this means and looks like. Is it velocity that you talked about? Is it just having that joy and delight that you want to bring to customers? Is it storytelling? What's that one thing that you're like, if you're an entrepreneur, work on this and be great at this, and that will give you, it won't guarantee anything, but it will give you a higher chance at the outcome that you hope for.
Yeah. I'm going to cop out and do two things.
Okay.
First is mission. That's the word that was coming to mind as you're asking that question, which is, even if there's no monetary outcome here, was it a worthwhile use of my time? Because you wanted something to change this badly that you would dedicate a very substantial part of your life toward, right? And I just got to tell you, like, once you have found the mission of just like, this is why God put me on earth, right, for this moment, or just like the stars have aligned in the universe, and like I get like why, this cosmic moment, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, whatever it is. And I felt that with a few startups, not all of them, but with a few. That's special. And it makes the hard times a lot easier because you know why you're doing it. And this could apply to families and relationships as well. I think mission is that part. And then the second thing too is invest in understanding how to the craft of great storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Again, like at the end of the day, I'm convinced that there's very little difference between you and me here today, Adam, like recording this on Riverside, to our ancestors 20,000 years ago who are in hunter-gatherer packs and clans. You know, they ended their day trying to chase buffalo or gather and forage for food, but probably around a campfire, just talking about oral histories, right? And that's it. And you know, if you can get into understanding how great storytelling works, starting with very keen listening, like vulnerability and so forth, then I think that's going to just like lift all ships in terms of the quality of the relationships in your life, personally, but also professionally. And I'll give you the shortcut as to where I try to study storytelling the most these days. It's stand-up comedy. I'm not practicing it, but I watch a lot of it. And the reason why is if you look at a really skilled stand-up comedian, they only need 5 minutes to have a beginning, middle, and end that feels complete, right? Where you're just like, I learned something about you. I found it poignant. I found it hilarious. And like that was just like a magical moment. And I think that that is the highest order of storytelling that I can find right now is in stand-up comedy. So, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, I was actually gonna make a joke as much as I can because I'm not a stand-up comic, but it's like it's such an Eric answer. Be like, I love stand-up comedy because I learn about storytelling, not because I just get a good laugh. But no, I mean, like, and you know, I care deeply about storytelling. Like, my goal one day is to write a book about how to do it well. And I have so much I can still learn to be better at it. But Eric, this was amazing. Thank you so much as always. And tell everybody here, right? How can they get in touch with you? How can they learn more about you? I know you're all over, so they should be able to find you. But like, where can people get more information so they can continue to learn and experience what you're willing to put out into the world?
Yeah, thank you for this, Adam. Again, it was such a special experience. I love that you are spending time to share this knowledge and highlight folks like myself and way more talented guests in this new podcast series. It's been really fun and amazing to watch your growth just as a friend, but as also a founder. So thank you so much for this opportunity. In terms of following up with me, we put a lot of stuff out there. So start with hustlefund.vc, Victor Charlie. That's our website. If you're a founder, we look at every single company that goes through our ingestion form on the homepage. You just click on that what are you hustling button, and then we will take a look and follow up. I put a lot of myself out there on social media too. You can follow me on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I'm at Eric Bahn. We're on LinkedIn as well. We're very, very active there. And I think that'll just give you a really good sense as you start to understand our community of like how we are telling our own stories too. But Adam, again, thank you so much for this opportunity. We're going to hang out in person really soon too.
I very much look forward to that. As always, this has been such a pleasure, Eric. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, thank you so much again for the time.